Hello and welcome to the MoBros Show, where I, Tip Mosley, pastor at Fellowship Baptist Church in Mount Juliet, Tennessee, will sit and discuss topics of life, ministry, and theology with my brother, J.P. Mosley, who is a professor and minister at Heidelberg Theological Seminary in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. On today's episode, JP and I will discuss musical influences, our history with music, and we'll dive into the book of Ecclesiastes to discuss the phrase, under the sun.
I don't want to find myself when it comes to music to all of a sudden just be in this one rut. And so I'll change it up by my mood for the day of what I'm going to listen to. And Skillet's one of those ones that when I read their lyrics and I listen to their stuff, I'm going, hey, you know what? They're speaking to a group. The same I thought with Evanescence, 15 years ago or so.
Wow, that's someone I haven't heard of in a long time.
Yeah, and I think they were hitting the same market that Skillet is hitting. Evanescence had a line in a song that I actually quoted in a chapel meditation when I was in seminary, where it was talking about pain and suffering, and she says in the bridge, "Christ, you're my tourniquet. You take the pain away." That just floored me. I thought that was great.
Yeah.
And people are going to get it. People who cut themselves are going to hear that and they're going to go, I need to try this Jesus that she's talking about.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of stuff that I'm listening for when it's that type of music.
And here's the interesting thing. Because I don't know what song you're talking about, but I hear you saying, and she actually said Christ.
You're my tourniquet. You take the pain away. Yeah.
Like she actually said that in a song.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Here's what Christian music did. They're like, here's what's popular in secular music and mainstream. So let's create something, or let's try to sell something that mimics that, but it has Christian lyrics or it's more of a Christian sort of thing. And there is actually a song by Marilyn Manson. That song is called Tourniquet. And he, I guess, would be referring to a girl or a lover or something that would be his tourniquet. So then that being, well, no, that's wrong. And so what's her name?
Amy something.
Amy Lee, I think is her name, with Evanescence. Like, no, actually that's who Christ is.
Yeah.
And like completely turns it on its head. But that was like, that's like darker kind of like, yeah. I liked Evanescence too. I mean, you and I used to really, that first CD, that first album that they had, man, her voice is so haunting. It was something different. It changed.
I think she's probably the best female vocalist I've ever heard.
Mm-hmm. Those heavy and thick guitars matched with her like haunting voice.
It resonated. It was very good. But I also look at like probably Robert Plant's probably the best male vocalist I've ever heard, and he transcends genres.
So you're getting into like Led Zeppelin area.
Yeah. I think Led Zeppelin's probably got the top greats for any instrument in a rock type of group at all, period.
I think one of the best drummers, one of the best guitarists, one of the best singers.
Yeah. I think they make the top lists, if not greatest. But, I also, having grown up in Nashville and then, not calling Nashville home for getting close to 20 years. I'll occasionally listen to country music. And it kind of reminds me of home, because a lot of times they're singing about where I grew up. Mm-hmm. And there's been a couple of songs recently, and both of them are by female artists, that I told Fran, I said, this is good music. And it's weird because, the men are the typical, the joke is, they lost their pickup, the girlfriend left them, the dog died. While the women, their songs are, if you cheat on me, I'm going to kill you. And so, and it just so happens to be, and I can't remember for the life of me. I could look it up real quick, but the one of them is the song, it's called I Hope. And it not only had a country version, but then they did a pop version with a pop artist. And I'm riding in the van with one of my boys. We were heading to Minneapolis so that I had a preaching engagement up there one Sunday. And that song came on the radio, and I think I'd heard it once or twice before this. And she had been on American Idol or Gabby or something like that. And this is her first hit. And I think Steven was in the car with me. And so I said, Steven, check this song out. He's listening to it. And he's like, oh, that's neat. That's neat. And then it gets to the hook of the song. And she says, I hope, you give her, you propose to her, and I hope she cheats on you like you cheated on me. And Steven goes, oh, that's not good. No, that's not good at all. And I'm going, what's the matter, son? He goes, she's mean. I go, well, welcome to Southern women. And then we get to this other one, and it's a duo.
Welcome to Southern women.
It's a duo. And I think one of them's name is Tay or something like that. I don't know. I can't remember. Fran remembers. But the song is, how do you get a red wine stain out of a white dress or something? But there's a line in there, and it's Mommy, can you ask Daddy to come and help me with the front door, but don't tell him why it's broken. Something like that. And it's about this girl just crying because her fiance or boyfriend or whoever had just left her. And it's just an extremely emotional song. And then the way that they're singing together, their voices go together, because it's a duo, it's just very good. And so, there's been a few songs. There was one, ironically, that Kenny Chesney put out. That was one that I was like, man, that's horrible kind of voice and arrangement. But the lyrics it's called Someday, Who You'd Be Someday. And it's about somebody who's died, and he's looking back, and he's just, I wondered who you'd been someday. And then there's a couple that he's done that are just good lyrics, good songs, but I think he only sings in one key. His octave range is not very high.
Oh,
that bothers me a little bit, but that's the way country music is sometimes.
Do you know who that is?
Kenny Chesney.
You already said the name?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there was a lock-in that I went to. Lock-in, good grief, I hated lock-ins when we were younger.
Yeah.
And they had, in one room, they had video games and stuff going, and they had music playing, and it was Kenny Chesney. And I was sitting there with my guitar, just playing around with the songs that were coming on. I'm like, all right, yeah, this is fun. Then the next song,
same thing.
It's in the same key.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the same 4 chords. Okay. And then the next song, it's in the same key.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the same. It's the same song.
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, it's Kenny. Hang on. But I'm telling you, I'm like, and this is at the time when Kenny Chesney, when sun go, what was it? Everything is hotter. That song.
Oh, with Uncle Cracker.
The sun goes down. Well, at that time, it was kind of like Kenny Chesney and then Brad Paisley. And I'm like, put on Brad Paisley, because that guy.
He's better. He went to Belmont, too.
That guy can tear up a guitar.
Yeah, and he can sing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and he can sing.
Yeah, yeah. He's in country music. I think he's probably one of the best. Brooks and Dunn, Garth Brooks, they're at the top.
As far as a performer, Garth Brooks could perform them all out of a stadium.
He kills it.
Yeah.
Brooks and Dunn are number 2 on the most all-time best duo writers.
Yeah. Talk about harmonies. Man, they got some good harmonies.
The only 2 that beat Brooks and Dunn is Lennon and Paul McCartney.
Huh.
They're the top. And then right under them on the list, and this is a list I had to study in college, was Brooks and Dunn. Now there could be difference now. There could be somebody that's beat them out, but back, 10, 15, 20 years ago, Paul McCartney still the top writing duo, and then Brooks and Dunn were number 2.
I think Paul McCartney's got new music out now.
He might. He still is phenomenal. He really is. But I think when it comes to music, when it comes to for me, it has to do with what kind of day I'm having. Because sometimes I'll come in and I'll listen to classical music, or I'll listen to kind of more if I'm needing to write something, I'll listen to more meditative music. If I'm reading or reading or studying something, I can have a CD going in the background.
Yeah,
I've even had books on CD in the background while I'm reading other things.
Yeah, so that's what I've been doing more than any. I haven't listened to a whole lot of music recently.
Yeah, and that's I even when I've been traveling, to go preach here and there, I've actually been listening to seminary lectures because I've got an iPhone and they're free on iTunes U. So I go on and listen to a whole course while I'm driving. But when I have my kids in the car, occasionally they'll want to say, "Dad, can we listen to some music?" And I said, "Sure, just as long as it's not terrible."
Yeah,
if it's terrible, we're going to put the theology back on. I can't fall asleep. I'll do that to Fran. I'll say, "All right, here, you pick out the music," and then she'll pick out something really bad, and I'll just turn it down.
I still think that
I'll wait till you find something.
I still think one of the best songwriters and producers is Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys.
Oh, man. Yeah.
I didn't know at the time, because when I was younger, I didn't get into music as far as like playing music and like really grasping on to the structure and
theory,
methodology, like musical method and all that stuff, musical theory. Until like 12 years old and up. And I always liked the song "God Only Knows" by the Beach Boys.
Yeah.
And I didn't find out until much later that was actually John Lennon's favorite song, and said that that's the best song ever written. That no song will ever compare to it. And I'm coming from a guy who has written some of the most well-known and best ever written songs that are out there.
Yeah.
When he wrote with Paul McCartney, and then he went on like, I don't like the song "Imagine."
No, it's horrible.
Yeah. And so he got into a headspace where he was very full of himself, I think. Anyway, but if you ever go and you listen to a lot of Brian Wilson's stuff.
Oh no, he has one of the top albums. Like it's in the top 10 of greatest rock albums of all time. I think it's called Pet Sounds.
Yeah, Pet Sounds from 1966. Pet Sounds. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's a movie about the recording of that album. It's dramatized, but the all that he went through in his head at the time and everything, and doing the best he could to like actually put it down. What? I think it was Paul McCartney who actually said that it was one of the best songs ever written, not John Lennon.
Yeah.
I'd have to look that up again.
It's one of the things when I was in college, I knew going into college, I wanted to go into pastoral ministry of some form or the other. And, realistically, when you get into college, you don't know exactly where you're going to land. You just kind of, at least for me, I knew there was a direction. I had direction. I had focus. And one of the things that I kind of told myself when I had choices. So, for example, I had to have in order to have my in order to get the core curriculum, I had to have a history class. And so I had a choice between, and it had to be ancient history or American history that led up to kind of the turn of the century, or recent American history. And I said, I'm going to do recent American history. And then the same choice when it came to literature, I could have picked British lit, older American lit, or recent American literature. So I went with recent American literature. And then I had a choice when it came to art. Did I want to do modern contemporary art? I'm like, no, that stuff's disgusting. I don't think putting a cross in a mason jar of urine is art. I think it's nasty and sacrilege. But I went with
that's a thing.
Art. It's a piece of art, yeah. And I'm not going to repeat the name of the art, but it is considered art. I went with ancient art history, where I had to study Egypt, Greece, Rome, and then medieval kind of art. That's what we. And I'm going, this is perfect, because the reason I went with recent American history, recent American literature is this is the history of the people I'm going to be ministering to. This is the literature. This is the art. These are the books of the people I'm going to be ministering to. But I didn't have that with music. I went with art. I went with what was the art in Rome? What was the art in Egypt? What was the art in Greece at the time of the Bible? What was the art in the church at the time of the Reformation? So that's where I went in that direction. While I was doing that art history, I took an elective, and it was all because of a class I had. It was a Greek class. And there was this old man that kind of was, I'm in the right half of the side. This old man was in the back left corner of the room. This is the corner where people are going to get failing grades if they sit there, because there is a grid in a classroom. If you sit in this grid, you're bound to get an A. He was in the corner where it's like, this is the F people. Uh-huh. And he was there. I'm getting there early. He's getting there early. And I'm like, who is this guy? And one of the professor finally told me, once you go, you ought to go talk to him, JP. And so one day I'm there early enough. He comes in, sits down. I asked him, I said, but, I've seen you in here. What's your story? This guy had a PhD. He had a couple of PhDs in music. And he used to teach at Oakland University, where he created a course that from that time on, where it was not only taught at Oakland University, but then was taught at all the junior colleges in that area, called Rock and Roll History.
Huh.
And he told me, he says, if I'm going to be a minister, I need to go and study the music of the people of my church. I was like, I've already been doing that with ancient, with history and literature. Might as well go and do this. And so I'm taking this art history, and then I took guitar, and then I took also rock and roll history. And the only thing Fran says, if you're taking this, you better get an A. She says, because this ain't a real class. Like, it's a real class. It's real. And that's so when I referenced Lennon, McCartney, and Brooks and Dunn, that's what that was from that course, that class that I took. And it gave me a different appreciation for certain music. And then it made me a little angry towards other music because it was lazy.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about Led Zeppelin, for example, the same is true with Cream.
Yeah.
There's that they're in a category all to themselves. So in sports right now, they're talking about super teams. LeBron James will get and attract all these guys to come and play with just to get championships. Well, the Yardbirds did that. There was Yardbirds 1.
Yeah.
And then there was Yardbirds 2, and Yardbirds 3 became Led Zeppelin. That's where Led Zeppelin comes from, is they just decided, hey, you know what? We're going to get this guy from this band. We're going to get this guy from this band. We're going to get this guy from this band. We're going to come together, and we're going to create this super band.
Yeah, Led Zeppelin was one of the first introductions that I had to. So John Bonham is playing in one time signature, and then the rest of the band, I don't remember the bass player's name, but
John Paul Jones, J.P. Jones.
John Paul Jones. There you go. Well, dead gum. Robert Plant's the singer. What is it?
Jimmy Page.
Jimmy Page. Yes. Sorry. Thank you. Are playing like, so if John Bonham's playing in 4/4, they're playing in 3/4 or 6/8. And that was the first introduction I ever had to that, mixing time signatures. And it came together while Robert Plant is singing in 4/4 or something. Like, it's ridiculous. But they're and you go back, like if I were to go back and look at Brian Wilson, and he did that kind of stuff. There were certain things that were in one time signature, and there were certain things that were in another time signature, and it all came together in the end. He would have a bass line that's in a different key that matched the song because they had like the same relative minor, and it would fit like in For God Only Knows, the song that I was mentioning earlier. The bass line in that song never touches the root note. I don't know what key it's in. Let's just say if it were in the key of G, the bass never touches the G. It's only playing fifths and thirds throughout the entire song. And so it leaves you with this feeling of there's something coming next. There's something coming next. There's something coming next until it gets to the very end.
Yeah.
It's stuff like that like a layman or a modern person wouldn't hear it. Someone that plays is like, this is genius. Because he's making the feeling of the song match the lyrics of the song. And so it changes in the verses, and there's a key change for the chorus, and it changes the mood of the song. And that kind of stuff is brilliant. That kind of stuff you find with composers. Like if you're watching a movie that's scored by John Williams.
I was getting ready to say, this is where,
go
for it.
He is able to change your mood.
Yep.
Based on the music. Like if you listen to his scores throughout Star Wars, he has a certain theme for each character. For the
Empire, for Darth
Vader. And for Darth Vader, there's a motif. For Luke Skywalker, there's a motif. But what is crazy is you can bring them together because, spoiler alert, they're father and son.
Yeah. You think he knew that?
Yeah, he knew that.
What I was going to say is, if you go even further back to Mozart, Beethoven, some of the greats, what you find is what inspired Jimmy Page, Brian Wilson, and even current hip hop artists. People are going like Timberland. Hey, where are you getting that beat? He goes, man, I heard this crazy song by Beethoven the other day. And that's, I mean, it's like, think about that for a moment. And this is the main principle I learned in rock and roll history is there's nothing new under the sun.
Right.
Let's say A is Mozart. A influences B. And let's say B is Jimmy Page. Mozart's got something to do on a harp or a stringed instrument or even the piano, and it influences Jimmy Page. Jimmy Page then equals a Led Zeppelin song. But it can get even further than that. You could say Mozart influenced, and this is going to be really in it, but it's true, the Rolling Stones. And then because the Rolling Stones kind of had this, or the Beatles, because they had this particular style or song, that then breaks off into the Who or Led Zeppelin or Black Sabbath, which then carries it down to the Cure or the Sex Pistols, or you name another. And then all of a sudden now we're down to Nirvana and Green Day, Metallica. That's the course and it's not cyclical. It doesn't do a circle. We're not going back to Mozart. Now we're going, hey, we're back to a time of no.
Mm-hmm.
It's a historical progression.
Yeah.
Now some would even call it regression because they're going to say Mozart is the best. Mozart's the highest. But history progresses. We're going somewhere. We're ending somewhere. And I always thought that was a good way of looking at it because it's a proper view of history. Even theology works that way. When I'm teaching ancient church history and I'm having guys read, for example, Athanasius' book on the Incarnation, and I'm saying, now guys, y'all need to recognize he's doing this without Athanasius. He's writing this book without having had read somebody like him. He's coming up with this. This is his work. And then you get to a saint like Augustine. You get to a guy like Augustine. He has Athanasius. He has these other guys. And then you start going, okay, so then when you step and the church divides and then you got the East and West, what's the real big issue with the East? They don't have Augustine. Yep. And so Augustine's one of those, if you've got the scriptures and you have then Augustine's writings, you get a Martin Luther.
Mm-hmm. It's like you wouldn't have B if it wasn't for A.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, you touched on something. There's a song by the Beatles, "All You Need Is Love," that I think they feel like they were being prolific when they wrote this, but there's nothing you can do that can't be done, nothing you can sing that can't be sung, stuff like that. There's nowhere you can be that isn't where you're meant to be, that kind of stuff, which always makes me think of Ecclesiastes. But then because the Beatles, they're not doctrinally sound. They're not scripturally based, nothing like that. But you mentioned the Yardbirds, but I want to mention just the Byrds.
Oh yeah.
There was a song by the Byrds where this is where we get David Crosby was in the Byrds, spelled with the Byrds spelled with a Y instead of an I. Yeah. There were a lot of great musicians that came out of the Byrds, and there were a lot of acts that they were associated with, like a lot of stuff from Bob Dylan came from the Byrds, and they've got a song called, what is the name of the song? I think the name of the song is just Turn, Turn, Turn.
It's yeah.
Which I don't know if you remember. This may have been one of the songs that you did when you were in second grade. When you were in second grade, there was that musical history play that y'all did, where y'all dressed up from different eras, different decades.
I had to be a hippie.
Yeah, so you were from the 60s, right?
Yeah.
And I think that may have been one of the songs that you did. I don't remember.
I think so. I was just in the choir part of it. I don't.
Yeah. But to everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under heaven. And where does that come from?
Right.
Ecclesiastes.
Right.
To everything there is a season. A time to build up, a time to break down, a time to dance, a time to mourn, a time to cast away stones, a time to gather stones together. Yeah. And so they're pulling that straight from scripture, from Ecclesiastes, which Ecclesiastes was always one of my favorite books to go to. And you were talking about like going to music when you're in a certain mood.
Yeah.
I think that there's certain books of the Bible that you can go to when you're in a certain mood. And anytime that I'm like really down and out and I need to pick me up, knowing that there's someone out there who has felt the same way, I will turn to the Psalms of David and his son. Like I will turn to the wisdom of Solomon. And a lot of that is what we can, and it's people will read Ecclesiastes and be like, oh, it's just so sad. Well, it's truth.
Yeah.
Sadness is a part of being human.
Yeah.
But what is the Ecclesiastes? What does that word mean? Because I can't remember what that word means.
It's actually, so to get kind of, when we're asking how they got certain names for books.
Uh-huh.
it ends up being just the first words in the book. And so, for this matter, it's the second word in both the Greek and the Latin, and it simply is preacher.
Oh, okay.
In Hebrew, it's kohelet. And so a lot of times, if you pick up a commentary of Ecclesiastes, the commentator will refer to the book as to the writer, to the person. It's kohelet because that's the word. He's the preacher. He's the teacher. And in Greek, it's where we get the word Ecclesiastes, and that's essentially the preacher, the teacher, and that's the voice. And if you pay close attention as you're going through each chapter, he ends up, and to me, this actually shows proof. Not only does the first verse tell you that this preacher, the words of this preacher, the words of this teacher, is the son of David, king of Jerusalem. So I think right away you go, okay, this is Solomon. But I think once you read it, you're going, this has to be Solomon.
Mm.
Part of the reason is he ends up covering what would end up being every philosophy known to man.
Ooh. So in 12,
the Greeks
what we have broken down as 12 chapters, he's going to break down.
He's doing every philosophy known to man. Ooh. The Greeks aren't even doing philosophy yet when Solomon does this. And so let me give you a couple of for instances, and I don't have chapter verse put up here.
Okay.
If you look at, keep in mind, this is in the context of Old Testament covenant Israel, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they are to work 6 days a week and rest one. That's the fourth commandment. You're commanded to work 6 days. You're commanded to rest one day.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Remember the Sabbath.
Remember the Sabbath. Keep it holy. If you think your work is what defines you, you've got another thing coming.
Huh.
If you think your rest is what defines you, you got another thing coming. And that's essentially what he's getting at. He goes, look, I've studied this. I've done this. I worked here. I worked there. I built this. I built that. There's no end to this. There's no end to the type of work. And it's, to me, there's a key verse in there where he says, let me find it real quick. And while we're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and continue. So he goes to, not only does he talk about the workaholic, not only does he talk about the person that's not working, but then he goes into, for example, in chapter 12, verse 12, and further, my son, be admonished by these, of making many books there is no end, and much study is wearisome to the flesh. That's the seminarian's key text. That's the pastor's key text. There's always going to be another book to be published. There's always going to be the next sermon that needs to be written. There's always going to be the next counseling session, the next meeting. My wife, early on in ministry, had to learn, I'm not ever done with my work.
Yeah.
That's Ecclesiastes' point. It's till the day you die. Now, so that's the workaholic. There's wisdom for the workaholic. You need to learn how to rest. There's wisdom for the lazy, the sluggard. You got to learn how to work. But then there's also pragmatism found in this. There's hedonism found in this. And so if the person thinks, I'm going to pursue pleasure, Ecclesiastes, Solomon's already done it.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, there's no joy there. If I'm going to focus on things that just work, you're going to find out there's a lot of things that just simply don't make sense and are not going to work. It's a beautiful, beautiful book.
Mm-hmm.
And it's rich in gospel imagery. Because if we recognize Solomon's wisdom here, when we get into the Gospels, we find out there's actually one wiser than Solomon.
Yep.
Who points to the real meaning of things. Solomon, at the end of the day, he says, so what's the conclusion on the matter? Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all. And in the Presbyterian tradition of the church, they've got what's called the Westminster Shorter Catechism, and it asks this question. Its first question is, what is the chief end of man? And the answer is, the chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. Where do you think they got that from?
It has to be scripture.
It's right here. Let us hear the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all. Glorify God and enjoy him forever. Look, so yeah, we may think doing dishes and changing diapers are tedious. You're not going to be doing that forever. Mm-hmm. What are you going to be doing forever? Glorifying God and enjoying him forever.
Yeah.
And that's what Ecclesiastes does. For me, Ecclesiastes is that sober wake-up call. Don't create idols out of life.
Oof.
Out of study, out of work, out of pleasure, out of leisure. Don't do it. I tell Fran, I've always wondered what it would be like to follow a team. I know you and Dad follow the St. Louis Cardinals.
Mm-hmm.
I've always wondered what it would be like to follow a team, and I've just never done it. I've never had time to. And, when you end up having the amount of, when you end up going to school, the amount of time I've gone to, and then you end up having the amount of kids I've had, your time goes to other places. And so maybe one of these days,
it's understandable.
Maybe one of these days I'll get to follow a team. But that's the point of Ecclesiastes. You started quoting that, there's a season for this and a season for that.
Yeah.
And some of the best wisdom I think I've ever been able to give somebody is what I learned from Ecclesiastes. You can't do everything. You can't. And Ecclesiastes has taught me how to say no and how to know my limitations.
Mm-hmm. Well, the bird song, Turn, 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 comes from Ecclesiastes chapter 3.
Yeah.
For everything there is a season and a time for everything, for every matter under heaven. I want to take you to just chapter 1.
By the way, it also has it has a secondary title, the bird song. So it's Turn, Turn, Turn. That is the primary title. Secondary title is To Everything There Is a Season.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. It's the first line of the.
Yeah.
But when we've been doing this now. This will be our 10th episode. That's crazy. 10 episodes.
Is it?
Yeah. This one that we're recording right now is our 10th episode.
I hope you're keeping track. I don't know. I take your word for it.
Yeah. You can. The 9th one is going to be up. Well,
okay.
The 9th one is going to be up this week as we're recording it. So this one that we're recording right now will actually be out next Friday.
And it's an overcast day here in Sioux Falls.
It's been storming here.
I bet.
So it only seems natural that for the people that actually listen to this, they might say, "Hey, what about this phrase?"
Yeah.
So Dad did that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So Dad was like, you guys need to look at under the sun, the phrase under the sun. And I'm like, well, I know that one's used a lot. It is used
27, I think.
27 times in Ecclesiastes.
You counted 26. I counted 27.
I counted 26. I went through every single page. Maybe I missed one.
Yeah.
No, I didn't. I didn't actually count.
I might have counted one twice, but I counted it 3 times.
It's used a lot in Ecclesiastes.
Yeah.
But one that catches my eye is chapter 1, verse 9. And this is where I was kind of like, I think whenever I listen to the All You Need Is Love by the Beatles, the reason why I go to Ecclesiastes in my mind is because of verse 9, because there's a phrase, there's a lyric that they have in there that's similar to what is being said in Ecclesiastes. But what has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun.
And it rhymes, doesn't it?
It does.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That normally doesn't happen when you're going from Hebrew to English.
It's funny how it does, though.
Yeah. This is a fun verse.
Mm-hmm.
I have to tell my students, and I've said this a few times, don't think that you're going to come up with some original idea that's going to blow me away. Now, understand, seminary is meant to be a humbling experience for people. We've got guys that churches have said, hey, we think he's got gifts, train him for the ministry. We've got guys that come out of college that are going into seminary that have been top dogs in the collegiate field, and they come into seminary.
They come in hot-headed. They come in with big, large heads.
Yeah. They think they know something. And they do. They do. They do know things. That's why they're in seminary. They're competent enough to go get a master's degree. A very, very hard master's degree. One of the, there's only 2 other degrees that match the amount of work you have to do to get a master's divinity, and that's a medical doctorate and a Juris Doctorate, to be a lawyer, to be a physician. I mean, those are the only 2 that match the master's divinity, and so you have to be knowledgeable to get into seminary, but it's real quick you find out, as well as the physician and the lawyer. This is why Ecclesiastes 12 is important. This is why Ecclesiastes 1 is important. I'm stepping into something that doesn't have an end to it.
Huh.
And think about that. The same is true with law, because until Christ returns, sinners are going to continue to find new ways to sin against each other. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to be new in the fact that murder is always murder.
Right.
Cover up is always cover up. That's nothing new under the sun.
Right.
But then there's the body. Think about what we just went through last year, which was extremely politicized. But there is a virus going around. There is a sickness going around, and it's affecting people in ways that we've not ever seen affected. And praise God for physicians.
Mm-hmm.
Ministers are dealing with a book. They literally will study until their dying days.
Yeah.
And will still not go deep enough in it. And then to add all of the books that are written on the book, still not plumb the depths of the knowledge of God. And that's a very hard lesson for a lot of people to learn.
I think John grasped it a little bit
at the end of his gospel.
At the end of his gospel, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn to that real quick, because that's
that was my closing devotion for my hermeneutics class last week. We finished. That was the last class, and we looked at that particular verse.
What does he say? It's verse 25. Now there are also many other things that Jesus did, were every one of them to be written, I suppose that the world itself could not contain the books that would be written.
There's not a big enough library.
No.
That's it. It's phenomenal.
Huh.
And so, the point I'm getting at is everybody thinks that their job, that their work is important. I enjoy listening to the individual who cleans carpets and they're taking it seriously. This last job that we had of cleaning this carpet or tearing this carpet up, laying this, was extremely important. That's good. That's a study of Ecclesiastes right there. Or the person who cooks hamburgers and they want to get it right every time.
Yeah.
That's good. That's a study of Ecclesiastes right there. Why? Because that's what we're here to do. We're here to serve God as we serve each other. And one of the wonderful doctrines that came out of the Reformation was the doctrine of vocation. Before that, the only people that were called to serve God were ministers. That was the only calling. Vocation means a calling in life.
Mm-hmm.
And after the Reformation, the watchmaker, by the way, that was invented at the time of the Reformation. There was no such thing as watches until after the Reformation. But the watchmaker, the tanner, the cobbler, the barber, all of a sudden they were called to serve God in those areas. Where before it wasn't seen as much. It was just a trade that you learned from your dad. Afterward, it was one of the most important things you could do, because you were doing it for God and for your fellow man. That changes the game, and I think that's what Ecclesiastes is getting at.
So when Paul is writing in Colossians chapter 3, let me turn there real quick, because this is one that I went to a lot when I was an exterminator. I went through the burnout, coming out of a master's degree, jumping into a job in counseling that was extremely overwhelming. I was good at what I was doing, but I was put under a lot of pressure and a lot of work doing it. I think it's Colossians 3:23. Yeah. And then I got to the point to where I'm like, I just can't do this anymore for my own health and the health of my family, the health of my marriage, the health of my family. I just stopped. I went to my boss and I said, I'm going to give you 2 more weeks. And in those 2 weeks, I'm going to give you everything I've got, but I just cannot do this anymore. I feel like I've got a different calling, because I had a strange lightning bolt to the brain realization driving home from a vacation. And then I went from that to laying floors, went from that to spraying bugs. But I had to constantly remind myself that I am doing this for myself, because for my well-being. I mean, I am doing this for my wife. I am doing this for my kids, even though it's grueling work and it is not what I want to be doing. I constantly went to Colossians 3:23, where it says, whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men. That was always what I went to. And the good thing is that I had a boss who was an associate pastor at a church, and he understood. He's like, you're not supposed to be here, but this is where God has you right now. And who knows what's going to come out of it? I didn't know what was going to come out of it. I didn't know that I was going to be spraying bugs at the church where I'm the pastor now. I didn't know that's how that was going to end up. I didn't see I knew God was moving, but I couldn't see God's hand moving, which I don't think that we're supposed to all the time. It's like a 2020 sort of vision that you have, like, retro, looking back. What is it? Hindsight is 2020. It's like looking back, you can see God's hand moving in those times. But I constantly, I had to keep that focus of I'm not doing this for man. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to kill those bugs for God. And here's what's great. I had many opportunities where I witnessed with people. There was a coworker who had broken his thumb, and I had to ride around with him to help him with his jobs. And he was very much living a life unto sin, and was, we'd be out on a job and he'd be like breaking his neck to look at a woman walking away. And I'd say, what are you doing? And he would say something like, oh man, she wants me to look at her. I'm like, no, she doesn't. How's your wife doing right now? And he's like, man, I'm sorry. I said, how's your, and I would hit him hard with stuff. And there were many days where we would end with prayer of me praying with him. And then he ended up saying, when we were done with our tenure together of me having to help him because he broke his thumb, he said, I don't know why you're at Cook's Pest Control, but I do appreciate the fact that you and I had all this opportunity to sit and talk about God and to pray together and to talk about Scripture, because it changed me, which blew me away completely, because I wasn't expecting that at all. And so it felt like in a moment. And it's possible that when I was doing that counseling, that I was changing the lives of those teenagers. I would hope. All I was doing, even though in my mind, I hated what I was doing, and it felt like I was getting nowhere. But the entire time, God was putting people in my path that needed to see him. And I think it was Mom who would actually instill within us that we might be the only example of Christ that people will ever have in their life. And so we must live our lives in a way that people will see Christ. Walk the walk. You know, where were we? I think I just went on a weird tangent there.
I think it's I think that's in essence what Ecclesiastes is getting at. Because this phrase under the sun shows up 26, 27 times, essentially we're getting at the heart of the book. This may be a completely different show because we're talking about life. We're talking about, study. We're talking about things that we do for a living, family, how we are to raise our children, goals and perspectives they ought to have. And in a sense, Ecclesiastes gets at why we exist. And it's from a fallen perspective. I mean, in other words, it's not life in the Garden of Eden. It's life in a fallen world.
Right. Not life in paradise.
Not life in paradise. And it's realistic. And I think in order to have a proper view of life, you have to have both. You have to have a realistic view of things in mind of the ideal. The ideal is, of course, Christ. The ideal is glory. The ideal is perfection. And none of us are going to reach this side of glory, because that's what awaits us.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, how are we supposed to live? How are we still supposed to live? And whether you're looking at Ecclesiastes 12 or Colossians 3, at the end of the day, we know exactly what we're supposed to do. We're to serve God.
Mm-hmm.
And in serving God, we end up serving others. That's the beauty of the law. Love God.
Love others.
Love your neighbor.
Love your neighbor, yeah.
And it's in that order.
Right.
And I do think Ecclesiastes gets at that. And really cool plug, because we're getting towards here at the end of our recording time. But here at the seminary, Dr. Maynard Kerner has actually put up on the seminary's YouTube channel a series on Ecclesiastes. It's very good.
What's do they have a unique URL that we could?
I don't know. That's a good question. So I believe if you just go to YouTube and type in Heidelberg Theological Seminary, it should pop up. But I'm on there normally. And so, yeah.
Heidelberg Theological Seminary. Oh, yeah, I recognize the logo.
Yep. Anyway,
I see Dr. Kerner there.
Yeah, and some of the other podcasts that we're doing. But his series is What's It All About?
I'm going to sign in on this and subscribe to it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I like other people to do it. It's a good channel. Even some of the stuff that we do called From the Classroom, which is kind of our podcast as a seminary, is up there as well. And then occasionally there'll be other videos about our ministry in the Philippines, and just other promotional stuff. So,
what's it all about? Oh, cool.
Yeah. And that's his meditations on the Heidelberg Catechism. I mean, on the the book of Ecclesiastes. He's got other stuff on the Heidelberg Catechism that has been put in a blog form. Yeah.
Well, I want to come back to Under the Sun.
Oh, I think it's a good one. I think because it does show up that many times in the book of Ecclesiastes, there's a lot more context. To provide.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I didn't even. Thank you for listening, and we appreciate your support. If you would like to give in financial support to J.P. Mosley's ministries at Heidelberg Theological Seminary in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, you may do so at heidelbergseminary.org/support-HTS. That is heidelbergseminary.org/support-HTS. And if you would like to give to the ministries of Tip Mosley at Fellowship Baptist Church in Mount Juliet, Tennessee, you may do so at thefellowshipbc.org/give. That is thefellowshipbc.org/give. Thank you, and may God bless.